Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. Has you ever found yourself wrestling with the sheer unpredictability of life?
Oh, definitely. That feeling that things are just chaotic sometimes.
Exactly, that relentless push and pull, the swirling chaos. And we're all searching for a compass, aren't we? A way to navigate it all.
Some way to find peace, yeah.
Yeah.
To live a good life, even when things get tough.
Well, today we're going to explore how some ancient wisdom, born from, well, actual struggle, might offer a surprisingly direct shortcut to just that.
It's a timeless quest, isn't it? People have always grappled with these big questions.
Sure.
Happiness, purpose, how to be resilient.
Right.
And the compelling thing here is, this isn't just theory. It's not dusty books in a library. This is a philosophy designed to be lived every day.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Today, we're pulling back the curtain on a figure who laid the groundwork for one of history's most enduring and, frankly, incredibly practical philosophies. We're talking about Zenon of Kishon.
The founder of Stoicism.
Exactly. And our mission today is to unpack his life, the intellectual ferment of his time, and the real pillars of his thought. We want to give you a structured, comprehensive understanding of this philosophy.
And one that's still surprisingly relevant.
Totally. And we've got some great source material to guide us. It gives a really detailed look into Zenon's journey, which didn't start where you might expect.
No, it didn't. It covers the Hellenistic world he lived in and the core ideas that still define Stoicism. So, yeah, get ready to see how a storm at sea could literally change history.
Okay, let's unpack this. Zenon's story, like you said, doesn't start in Athens, not the philosophical cradle we usually think of.
Right. It starts in Kishon, on Cyprus.
Yeah.
Born there around 334 BCE.
And Kishon wasn't just some quiet village, was it?
Oh, not at all. You have to picture it. A really vital port city right at the crossroads of Mediterranean trade. A melting pot.
So busy, cosmopolitan.
Exactly. Goods, ideas, people flowing in and out constantly. It would have been buzzing. This wasn't a place for quiet contemplation necessarily. It was about trade, interaction, pragmatism.
So that environment must have shaped him early on.
Absolutely. Growing up there, he'd be exposed to all sorts of different cultures, different ways of thinking. It was dynamic.
And his family background, was it scholarly?
Well, the sources suggest his family was actually pretty wealthy.
Yeah.
Involved in trade, maybe even shipping.
Ah, okay. So a commercial background.
Precisely. Which means his early experiences were probably pretty grounded in the real-world risk, negotiation, dealing with different people, the ups and downs of fortune.
Makes sense for a merchant city.
And that wealth likely gave him access to education, which was key later on. But we should be clear, the details about his very early life are pretty scarce.
Right.
Most of what we infer comes from looking back from his later philosophy. It's like trying to piece together his childhood from the adult he became. Got it. So, a privileged start steeped in commerce. How does a successful merchant's son from Cyprus end up founding a major philosophical school in Athens? That's quite a leap.
It really is. His early career was exactly what you'd expect following the family business, undertaking voyages across the Mediterranean. He was a man of the world.
Practical experience.
Definitely. Dealing with trade, economics, practical matters. And it was actually these business trips that brought him to Athens. He didn't arrive seeking enlightenment initially.
He was there for business,
Most likely, yeah.
pursuing commercial interests.
And Athens itself, what was it like then? It wasn't the Athens of Socrates and Plato anymore, right? This is post-Alexander.
That's a crucial distinction. Yeah,
Yeah.
Alexander the Great dies in 323 BCE, and the world totally shifts. His empire fragments.
Chaos ensues.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
The Hellenistic period begins constant wars between successor kingdoms, but also this huge spread of Greek culture into Egypt, Persia, even India. So Athens, while maybe less powerful politically, becomes this incredibly intense intellectual battleground, the beating heart of Hellenistic philosophy.
So who was competing there?
You still had Plato's Academy, Aristotle's Lyceum, evolving. But new schools were rising fast, the Cynics, who were pretty radical.
Right, Diogenes and all that.
Exactly. And the Epicureans, offering a different path focused on pleasure. Though maybe not quite how we think of pleasure today. More like tranquility.
So a real marketplace of ideas. Everyone claiming to have the answer to living well in this new, uncertain world.
You got it, a very dynamic, competitive scene.
Okay, so Zenon's in Athens, maybe on business, sees all this intellectual energy. But what really flipped the switch, what turned the merchant into the philosopher? I heard something about a storm.
Ah, yes, the storm. It's one of those stories that feels almost like fate, a real turning point.
What happened?
He was on a return trip to Cyprus, still a young merchant. His ship gets caught in a massive storm, utterly devastating,
Shipwrecked.
completely shipwrecked, forced to take refuge in Athens. This wasn't planned. It was disaster, loss, helplessness.
Wow. For a merchant, losing a ship, that's potentially everything?
Exactly. Financial ruin, loss of cargo, maybe even his identity in
Right.
a way. So facing this catastrophe, stranded in Athens,
What does he do?
the story goes, and it's a famous one, he wanders into a bookshop, seeking maybe some distraction, some solace.
Okay.
And he starts reading Xenophon's memorabilia, writings about Socrates. He's deeply struck by Socrates' calmness, his self-sufficiency, even facing death.
Mm.
So he asks the bookseller, where can I find men like this? And just then, the cynic philosopher Crates of Thieves walks by.
No way.
Yep, the bookseller just points and says, follow that man.
And he did.
He did. He became Crates' student, immersed himself in cynicism.
And what drew him to the Cynics specifically? They were pretty extreme, weren't they?
They were, but their core message must have hit home after his shipwreck. They emphasized a simple, virtuous life, totally in harmony with nature, rejecting conventional desires, wealth, fame, luxury.
Things he might have just lost.
Precisely. They championed inner freedom, self-mastery. They had this materialistic worldview focused solely on virtue as the only good, living according to nature, radical independence.
Stripping away externals.
Totally. And that became his initial inspiration, the bedrock. He learned from them the immense power of being independent from external circumstances, realizing well-being comes from within.
So he studies with the Cynics for years, really absorbs their ideas. But then he doesn't just become another Cynic. He starts his own thing. Why?
Good question. After really diving deep with Crates and the Cynics, he realized he wanted something more systematic, more comprehensive.
The Cynic approach wasn't enough.
He deeply valued their focus on virtue and nature, absolutely.
Yeah.
But maybe their methods, sometimes deliberately shocking, rejecting social norms, lacking a strong logical or scientific framework, maybe that felt incomplete to him.
Or maybe less appealing to a wider audience.
Perhaps he wanted to build on those powerful ethical insights, but integrate them into a more coherent system, something intellectually rigorous, applicable to everyone, not just those willing to live like Diogenes in a barrel.
Right. He saw the core truth, but wanted a better framework.
Exactly. He saw the goal, inner virtue was right, but the path needed broader, more rational foundations. Logic, physics, ethics, all connected.
And this ambition led to the actual myths of his school, right? The Stoa.
It did, in a very direct, almost mundane way. He starts teaching, establishes his own school, but where does he teach? Not in a private building initially.
Where then?
In a public portico, a covered walkway in the Athenian Agora. It was called the Stoa Poikile.
The painted Stoa.
That's the one. Famous for its murals depicting historical and mythical scenes. It was public, open. Anyone could come and listen, rich, poor, citizens, non-citizens, slaves even. Very different from the academy or lyceum.
More accessible.
Much more. And because he taught in the Stoa, his followers became known as the Stoikoi, the Stoics, people of the Stoa.
Amazing. The name came right from the location. Humble origins for such an influential philosophy.
It really is. Born in a public square, reflecting its practical, accessible nature from the start.
So he teaches there, refines his ideas. What about his later life? How did his influence spread?
He taught in Athens for decades, until his death around 262 BCE. He gained immense respect, not just for his ideas, but for his integrity, his simple life.
The Athenians liked him.
They admired him greatly, offered him citizenship, apparently entrusted him with the keys to the city walls, symbolic honors.
Wow.
And while the exact details of his death are debated, it's clear he worked systematically to build his school, attract dedicated students who would carry the torch. He wasn't just a thinker. He was building something lasting.
An architect of a way of life.
Exactly. Convinced that this philosophy could genuinely help people live better lives. It wasn't just academic. It was a blueprint for living. Which really brings us back to the world he was living in. You can't understand Stoicism without understanding the Hellenistic age.
Right. That backdrop is crucial. We touched on it. Alexander's death, the empire fragmenting.
It was a massive upheaval. Centuries of instability, war, huge cultural shifts. Greek culture spreading far and wide.
Egypt, Persia, India.
Yeah, creating these large, diverse, often anonymous cities. Very different from the classical Greek polis.
That self-contained city-state ideal was fading.
Fundamentally undermined. While Greek culture spread, the actual political freedom and self-governance of the old city-states really diminished under these big Hellenistic kingdoms.
So people felt less in control of the big picture.
Exactly. Less connected to the powers shaping their lives. And this, the sources suggest, caused a major shift inward.
How so?
People started focusing more on personal questions. How to live a good life when the world feels chaotic and out of my control? How do I find meaning?
Ah, so philosophy becomes more personal, less about the ideal state.
Precisely. It shifts from the collective polis to the individual psyche. The focus moved toward the individual's place in this huge, often bewildering cosmos.
Which means a whole new set of questions come to the forefront.
Right. It wasn't just about the structure of the universe or theories of knowledge anymore, though those were still important.
What became central?
Really practical daily life questions. How do I achieve happiness, eudaimonia, flourishing? How do I manage destructive emotions? Fear, anger, greed. How do I deal with society, with fate?
Questions born out of uncertainty.
Definitely. It reflects this struggle to find inner stability when the external world feels overwhelming. Philosophy wasn't a luxury. It was becoming a psychological necessity.
And Athens, even with its diminished political power, was still the place where these questions were being thrashed out.
Oh, absolutely. Still the intellectual hub, a buzzing marketplace for wisdom. Yeah, the academy, the lyceum, the cynics, the Epicureans,
All offering different answers.
each with its own system for happiness, for finding truth, a really rich, competitive environment.
So, in this melting pot of ideas, what was Zenon's unique contribution? How did he stand out?
His genius was in synthesis and systematization. He took the core cynic idea, virtue, living according to nature, inner independence, which really resonated with people's needs.
Yeah.
But he didn't just adopt it wholesale. He saw it needed more structure. So he brilliantly integrated those ethical concerns with rigorous logic and a coherent view of the natural world, the physics.
Building a complete system.
Exactly. More systematic than the cynics. He wasn't just advocating a lifestyle, he was constructing a whole philosophical operating system. Logic, physics, ethics, all interlinked.
So he was kind of bridging the classical focus on reason and the cosmos with these new Hellenistic concerns about the individual.
That's a great way to put it. He connected the classical emphasis on logic and natural science with the pressing ethical needs of his time. He realized you couldn't live well without understanding how to think clearly and how the universe actually works.
You need the whole picture.
You need the whole picture. Virtue wasn't just a moral choice. It was the logical, natural outcome of understanding your place in a rational universe.
Okay, let's get into that system. The three pillars of Stoicism: logic, physics, ethics. How did Zenon see these fitting together?
He saw them as totally interconnected, essential parts of a whole. Like an orchard. Logic is the fence protecting it. Physics is the fertile soil and the trees. And ethics is the fruit you harvest.
That's now.
Or like a body. Logic the bones, physics the flesh, ethics the soul. The key thing for Zenon, always, was that this wasn't just abstract theory.
It had to be practical.
It had to be a practical guide for living. Applied every day, it was about training yourself.
Okay, let's start with logic, the fence, or the bones. Why was clear thinking so fundamental for Zenon, especially coming from that practical merchant background?
Because for him, logic wasn't just about winning arguments. It was the foundation for living well. It meant using thought and language correctly to get precise knowledge, free from distortions.
Cutting through the mental clutter.
Exactly. Spotting faulty reasoning, your own biases, making sure your inner dialogue was sharp, rational. Because messy thinking leads to messy actions. So logic was a direct guide for ethics. If you master logic, you can distinguish what's truly good from what's merely indifferent, right from wrong, true from false. You can't be wise or virtuous if your thinking is flawed.
And how did they approach logic itself? Was it just formal rules?
It was quite advanced for its time, actually.
Yeah.
They focused heavily on propositional logic, how statements relate to each other, and crucially, they analyzed language itself.
How words shape thought.
Precisely. How the way we talk about things influences how we understand them and react emotionally. They dug into the structure of arguments, how to validate inferences. It was about ensuring your whole internal reasoning process was sound.
And where did knowledge come from? Senses? Reason?
Both, but with a clear hierarchy. The senses provide the raw data, the impressions from the world.
Okay.
But reason is the judge. Reason evaluates those impressions, tests them, decides if they're accurate, if they represent reality correctly. Reason is the ultimate criterion of truth.
So don't just react blindly to what you see and hear.
Exactly. Apply reason first. Understand before you judge or act. That really set them apart from schools that relied more heavily just on experience.
Okay, clear thinking is the foundation. Then comes physics, or natural philosophy, the soil, or the flesh. What was Zenon's picture of the universe?
It all centered around the concept of logos.
Logos, heard that term. What did it mean for Zenon?
Not just word or reason in an abstract sense. For Zenon, logos was the active rational principle, the living soul that permeates and governs everything in the universe.
The universe itself is rational.
Entirely. It operates according to a perfect rational order, not by chance. Everything unfolds through a chain of cause and effect. It's a deterministic view. The universe is like a single intelligent organism working towards rational ends.
Okay, deterministic. That sounds tricky. If everything is predetermined, where does human freedom fit in? Are we just puppets?
That's the classic question. And Zenon's answer is subtle. He said humans aren't separate from this logos. We have a spark of it within us, our own reason. So our goal isn't to fight fate, which is impossible anyway. It's to understand the rational order and live in harmony with it, to align our will with the will of the universe.
Accept what happens.
Understand and accept the necessity of what happens externally, yes. The laws of the universe are fixed. Trying to resist them or wish they were different just causes suffering. Happiness comes from living in accordance with this rational nature.
So freedom isn't changing events, but changing our response.
Precisely. You don't control what happens to you, but you absolutely control your judgment about it, your attitude, your inner response. That's where true freedom lies. Freedom within fate.
That's a powerful idea. And how did Zenon describe the actual stuff of the universe? Was it material? Spiritual?
He had a fascinating view.
Yeah.
Materialist and monist.
Monist meaning one substance.
Exactly. Only one fundamental substance makes up everything. No separate spiritual realm like Plato's forms. For Zenon, this substance was a kind of active, intelligent fire.
Fire, like literal fire.
Not quite ordinary fire, more like a primordial creative energy, sometimes translated as pneuma breath or spirit. It's both the matter and the animating spirit of the universe, the essence of logos itself.
So mind and matter aren't separate.
In his view, no. Everything, even mind or soul, has a material basis in this universal rational fire, which constantly shapes and organizes the cosmos.
And this connects back to ethics.
Absolutely. This unified view grounds the whole ethical system. We are part of this rational material cosmos. So living ethically means living according to the very nature of reality itself. Your inner life isn't separate from the universe. It's a manifestation of the same rational principle.
Which leads us perfectly to the third pillar, ethics, the fruit or the soul. If logic is how we think, physics is what the world is, then ethics is how we live in it. What was Zenon's core idea here, especially after his own brush with disaster?
His core idea was radical. True happiness, eudaimonia, flourishing does not depend on external things.
Not on wealth, health, status.
Nope. All those things are fleeting, unpredictable, ultimately outside our full control. They're indifference, in Stoic terms. Nice to have, maybe, but irrelevant to true happiness.
So where does happiness come from?
Entirely. From internal virtue, from your character, from living in harmony with nature, which for humans means living according to reason, aligning your soul with the universal logos. It's an inside job.
Totally independent of circumstances. That must have been liberating for people in that unstable era.
Immensely. It gives you a source of well-being that no one and nothing can take away.
And how do you cultivate this internal virtue? Did Zenon give practical pointers?
He did. He identified the 4 cardinal virtues, which became central to Stoicism, wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance.
Okay, break those down. What do they mean in practice?
Right. So wisdom is knowing what's truly good, virtue, bad, vice, and indifferent, everything else. It's the practical knowledge to make rational choices, like knowing honesty matters more than wealth. Courage isn't just physical bravery. It's the mental strength to face hardship, fear, pain, uncertainty with resilience. Doing the right thing even when it's tough.
Like facing shipwreck calmly.
Or speaking truth to power, or enduring loss without falling apart. Then there's justice. That's about fairness, integrity, treating others well, recognizing our shared humanity as parts of the logos, fulfilling our duties to the community.
Acting for the common good.
Exactly. And finally, temperance, or moderation, self-control. managing our desires and impulses, keeping them rational, proportionate, not being enslaved by appetites, moderation in all things.
Not necessarily denying pleasure, but controlling it.
Precisely. Self-mastery. These four virtues working together allow you to control your reactions, be guided by reason, fulfill your social roles. That leads to a balanced, stable, truly happy life.
It sounds like controlling emotions is key here, which brings us to that famous, often misunderstood term, apatheia. What did Zenon really mean by that? It sounds like apathy.
Ah, yes. Crucial distinction. Apatheia is not apathy, as we use the word today. Not indifference or suppressing all feeling. That's a total misreading.
What is it then?
It means freedom from destructive passions. Specifically, freedom from irrational, excessive emotions that stem from false judgments,
Like what?
like panic, uncontrollable rage, insatiable greed, crippling grief, addictive pleasure-seeking. Emotions that hijack your reason and cause inner turmoil because you've wrongly judged something external as truly good or bad.
So it's about emotional regulation through reason.
Exactly. Using reason, that first pillar, to prevent these irrational states from taking over. It's achieving spiritual tranquility, inner freedom. It's not about being emotionless. The Stoics recognize rational, appropriate emotions like joy and virtue or caution.
So it's not being a robot, but being the master of your emotions, not their slave. Like being the captain of your own ship, not tossed by the waves.
That's a perfect analogy. Having emotions that are rational, proportionate to reality, rather than being swept away.
Wow.
So when facing difficulty, the goal isn't to feel nothing, but to feel appropriately without being overwhelmed by destructive passion.
And this apatheia is the state of inner peace.
It's the ultimate goal, yes. Inner peace, reconciled with fate, unshaken by external events, good or bad, true equanimity, where all three pillars, logic, physics, ethics, come together. Profound serenity and resilience, inner freedom.
Incredible. Zenon built this whole system from his experiences. But what happened after him? Did Stoicism evolve?
Oh, definitely. He laid the foundation, but his successors really built upon it. His student Cleanthes took over the Stoa first, preserving the teachings. He wrote that famous hymn to Zeus, capturing the idea of logos.
Okay.
But then came Chrysippus of Soli. He's often called the second founder. He was incredibly prolific, wrote hundreds of works, apparently. He systematically deepened and expanded Zenon's ideas in logic, physics, and ethics. He was a brilliant logician, addressed counter-arguments, really solidified Stoicism as a robust intellectual system.
Made it watertight, so to speak.
Something like that, yeah. Made it intellectually formidable.
And it clearly caught on beyond Greece, right? It became huge in Rome.
Immensely popular, especially among the Roman elite. It became arguably the dominant practical philosophy for centuries there.
Through figures we still know today.
Absolutely. Think of Seneca, statesman, writer, advisor to Nero, trying to apply Stoicism in the heart of Roman power politics.
Right.
Then Epictetus. Fascinating story. A former slave who became this incredibly profound teacher. His focus was laser sharp on what's in our control versus what isn't.
The dichotomy of control still so relevant.
Totally. And then, of course, Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of Rome, writing his personal Stoic journal, the Meditations, while on military campaigns, applying these ideas to the immense pressures of rule.
Wow. From a merchant to a slave to an emperor, all finding value in it.
It shows the universality of it,
Yeah.
applicable across all walks of life.
So looking back, what's Zenon's single biggest, most lasting legacy? The thing that really sets Stoicism apart?
I think it's that revolutionary idea. Philosophy isn't just for academics in ivory towers. It's a practical, daily discipline for everyone.
A guide to living.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Applicable to every part of your life.
Yeah.
From dealing with annoying emails to facing serious loss. It's about practice, training your mind, the core teaching. Focus on mastering your inner world, your judgments, reactions, characters, because the external world is largely beyond your control.
Mastering the inner fortress.
That's the real power, according to Zenon.
And how does this ancient wisdom still echo today? You see it in modern psychology.
Oh, profoundly, especially in things like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. The influence is undeniable.
How?
Many core CBT techniques, identifying and challenging irrational thoughts, focusing on what you can control, reframing situations to change emotional responses. These have direct roots in Stoic thought. Zenon's idea that it's not events, but our judgments about events that disturb us. That's central to CBT.
Still helping people manage anxiety, depression, stress today.
Absolutely. It shows how timeless these principles are for mental well-being, for building resilience. And beyond psychology, Stoicism really shifted ethical thinking. The focus on individual virtue, personal responsibility, living in accordance with a rational universe. These ideas still resonate in ethical debates today. It gave people a framework for a purposeful life, independent of fortune. True wealth is character, not possessions.
So wrapping up this deep dive, Xenon of Kishan, clearly more than just a founder. He was this pivotal figure who created a holistic, practical system for living.
Totally. His genius was integrating logic, physics, and ethics into this unified guide for inner peace and virtue, grounded in a rational cosmos. He made sense of the world and showed people how to thrive within it, even amidst chaos.
And his philosophy, born from that Hellenistic turmoil, really bridged the gap between older Greek thought and the new focus on the individual.
Yeah, it gave people an anchor inward when the external world felt unpredictable, a source of meaning beyond external circumstances.
So, a final thought for everyone listening. Consider how Zenon's teachings, especially that idea of apathy of freedom from destructive passions, mastering your inner world, how that might apply to your life today.
Right, in our world of constant stress, anxiety, information overload.
What might it truly mean for you to live in harmony with reason right now? How could cultivating those four virtues, wisdom, courage, justice, temperance, empower your own journey? Something to think about.